Well, we all know what happened the last time the president spoke, a family meeting. There was an expectation that there was going to be a harder level lockdown. It seemingly didn't happen. We also know the president, once he arrives back in the country, is going to be having another urgent meeting with the National Coronavirus Command Council. So what is the story with lockdowns? Is that our default positioning in the country, or is there another way of doing this? Let's speak to Oliver Dickson, political commentator, joining us this morning. Hello to you, Oliver. Good to have you with us here on the South African Morning. Hard lockdown? No hard lockdown. Is this the only way we know how to manage this in South Africa?
Yeah, we have to move beyond that. And I think the only way we can move beyond that would be for government to demonstrate any sort of creativity in thinking how it can start, if it needs to, how it limits people's movement without enacting draconian sort of regulations and interventions. Such as, for instance, interprovincial travel being banned, although we haven't seen that in a while. But stuff that will, as in the past, ruined entire industries, like the outright ban or the excessive limitations on the sale of alcohol. Restaurants cannot survive during that time. And it's important that we have this chat now, because December is a time of the year where that industry depends very strongly on those on that sort of cash flow, right? And if we were to experience another hard lockdown to the extent that it limits the sale of alcohol, restaurants, the tourism industry just wouldn't be able to survive this. The hospitality industry will take a major knock. And these are industries that are still in recovery mode. They still have not recovered. Many of them.
It's been a rough 18 months. It really has, Oliver. It's been a rough 18 months for them. There seems to be no end in sight. I think many people are going to agree with you. Allow me to play devil's advocate for a moment. The reason we've been told from the beginning for these hard lockdowns is not just to stop people moving around. Medical experts say that doesn't make much of a difference. It's to not fill up hospital beds. And here's where I'm going with my point. We're coming into December, and even before COVID-19, hospital beds would get filled up because of car crashes, because of the high number of cars traveling during December, and of course the always big issue of alcohol and violence that comes with alcohol. That's going to fill up hospital beds. It did before COVID-19, and we're told that's why we have the hard lockdowns, to keep hospital ICU beds open. Does that still hold water with you?
So two things. One, we don't have a hospital worry problem just yet with the Omicron wave, as you know, Gareth, because the epidemiological data just does not suggest that there's a spike in hospitalization, and in particular that there would be a spike in ICU admissions, right? While we have a high caseload going up, we don't have an uptick in hospitalization and ICU admissions. So this either proves one of two things. One, vaccination works, so let's drive that. Or, as scientists are beginning to tell us, that Omicron just isn't as deadly and severe as we feared it to be. So given that fact, there's no concern about hospitals, and therefore we don't have to limit all the other things we think contribute towards pressure on hospitals and ICUs.
What do you mean by more transparent planning and engagement, Oliver? What do you mean by that? Because government is saying they are communicating. Would you agree? Is that open planning? Is that transparent planning and engagement? Is it good enough for you?
And that's the second point I wanted to make here about transparency, is that the government's not entirely transparent, Gareth, about the data they rely on to make these decisions, right? We all ask, what scientific data do you have that suggests, for instance, that a 10 p.m. curfew works better than a 9 p.m. curfew, or that a ban on interprovincial travel or a ban on the sale of alcohol removes the strain on the ICUs? Because the reality here is that while road accidents do contribute to road accidents as a result of alcohol abuse do contribute to hospital admissions, the government is not telling us how many of those beds are occupied as a result of that, right? If it's less than 5%, Gareth, then that sort of intervention is just not congruent with banning an entire industry, for instance, that will put an entire sector out of business. That level of transparency is what's missing. Give us the numbers with more detail.
Oliver, I have not much time left with you, so let's make this our final question to you this morning. The president's arriving back in the country today. Obviously, he watches the South African Morning every single day. He's listening to you talk right now. What do you want the president to do when he lands and he's meeting with the eNCA?
I want the president, one, to be a lot more consultative, right? The NCCC is a body, within cabinet that meets behind closed doors, and they make decisions without necessarily consulting far and wide. They consult with premiers, church leaders, they consult with community, but they don't consult much with industry. In fact, they just pass a message down to industry across the board. I'd like for that consultation to be a bit more robust, but I'd like for the scientific data that informs their decisions to be front-loaded as part of their decision-making process and how they communicate that to us. Because without that, the decisions they make lack credibility.